What's up guys, Readiness Reviews here with you again, and today we're going to be doing some maintenance on this very unique last ditch Type 99 Arisaka, which was of course the main battle implement of the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II. You guys have seen this particular rifle on camera before, and it was essentially in gunsmith special condition, needing quite a bit of replacement parts in order to get it fully functional and complete. Those parts have finally come in, so I think it's about time to get this old guy up and running again. Before we dive into it, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you like seeing military surplus firearm videos on YouTube, and to subscribe to the channel to catch all of my future videos. Don't forget to drop me a comment, I love reading those. Now let's take it on over to the desk so we can see all the restoration work that this rifle needs. So here is our last ditch Type 99 Arisaka rifle. Has a refresher on my particular example here. We are looking at a Howa Juko Arsenal Series 9 rifle. My particular rifle has some interesting little adornments. First off, we have a Mexican coin that has been inlaid into the wood. We have a burned in outline of a coin here, and it looks like they messed up the first go around and then seared it where they wanted it the second time. On the previous video I posted on this rifle, people told me that was a 5 yen coin, which having the hole in the middle, that kind of makes sense. And we have yet another coin inlet into the buttstock. This one's done a little bit more crudely. It does have a little bit of glue overflow, although it is reset further into the wood than the other one was. And I think that is also a coin of Mexican origin. I have no idea where this rifle picked up those Mexican coins. I suppose whoever its previous owner was wanted to pretty their rifle up and thought the Mexican coins were pretty cool to inlay into their Japanese rifle. It's unique if nothing else. This rifle does have a mostly ground mum. You can see the outside of the chrysanthemum right there, just a little bit. And it has the majority of the late war features, including a wooden butt plate, crude weld and machining marks all over the place, fixed position rear peep sight, no front sight protector whatsoever, a mid-length handguard, no hardware on the barrel band for a monopod, and just a single screw hole for a sling swivel. When I purchased this rifle, it was missing the rear band screw. There was actually a twisted piece of wire holding the barrel band in place. I have since snipped that off, and there's a little remnant of the wire there. That'll be one of the things that we're fixing today. It was also missing our magazine internals. So we have our floor plate and we have the metal magazine box, but we do not have a spring or follower. Luckily, the bolt's all in one piece. The bore on this rifle is excellent. It's a very pretty chrome line bore, so I certainly think it's worth getting up and running again. I just wish I knew the story behind this particular rifle and how it managed to obtain this jewelry. It's taken a while to acquire the parts needed to restore this rifle. Arisaka parts are very expensive and they are not readily available. You can't just go on your major firearms parts retailers and get certain parts for Arisakas. So over the course of the past year or so, I obtained the parts I needed, all of which I got off of eBay, except for the magazine spring, which I think I got from gunpartscorp.org. So we did obtain a late war single screw sling swivel with a screw, both of which are pretty ugly and rusted. So we will be boiling and carding these before installing them on the rifle to stop any degradation of the parts in the future. I think that combo was about 20 bucks. I did pick up the rear band screw. I think by itself, this was like a $15 or $20 part, very expensive for a single screw. And I obtained a magazine follower. This one has very unfortunately been modified to allow the bolt to close on an empty magazine. In Japanese service, the bolt of the rifle was to remain open on an empty rifle to prevent a soldier from, in the heat of the moment, firing an empty rifle. Someone ground off the edge of the tab that prevents the bolt from closing, but other than that, it should still be a functional magazine follower, hopefully. This rifle had the little issue of the wooden butt plate being loose and essentially falling off anytime you pick the rifle up if it's sitting butt end down. The nails that hold the butt plate on are very rusty, so we will be boiling and carding those as well to stop any future decay. The holes in which those nails go into are pretty wallowed out and a bit bigger than they need to be to keep the butt plate securely attached. So one of the tasks we will be completing is tightening those holes up. When I first purchased this rifle, it was listed as being duffel cut. And at first glance, it does appear that there is a duffel cut there between the front wood and the back wood. However, I have since learned this is also a characteristic of a last-ditch Arisaka. To conserve on wood, they began producing 3-piece stocks, the first 2 pieces being the top half and the bottom half of the buttstock, and the other piece being this disconnected front end that allowed them to use smaller pieces of wood to piece a rifle together. If you look closely here, the wood grain between this piece and this piece do not match up, proving that it is not the same piece of wood. Now, under this handguard, we have what appears to be some white paint. Not sure why that's on there. It could be an attempt to cover up some rust or to make things fit a little tighter. I'm not quite sure, but we are going to attempt to get as much of that off as we can. Before we dig any deeper though, let's take our couple little metal parts that need the boiling and carding over to the stove to get started on that process. Since we're only doing a small batch of parts here, I have a small pot of boiling water, and we will very simply add our metal components to that boiling water for about 45 minutes to an hour. And what that's going to do is convert that orange oxide on the outside of the metal to an inactive black oxide that will no longer cause degradation of those metal components. While we have our small metal components boiling, let's continue work on the rest of the rifle. I think we need to get this action out of the wood stock to really get a good look at what we're working with here. There are 3 screws that hold the Arisaka action in. 1, 2, and 3. This last one actually runs directly through both parts of the 2-piece buttstock. On some rifles, these screws will be staked into place and can be very hard to get out. These have apparently been removed before because they are coming out very easily. And then our whole trigger guard and magazine assembly comes out there, and the main portion of the stock can be removed from the barreled action. It's a little bit of an old cobweb or maybe some mold or something in there, but overall the inside of this stock is looking very solid and pretty clean, all things considered. This last remaining piece of wood on the front end simply needs to be pulled down, and then it can be removed as well. On these late war 3-piece stock varieties of Arisakas, the front nose cap is actually pinned in place. It can be removed by knocking this pin out, but I'm not going to do that in today's video. By leaving that attached, it also means that I cannot take this barrel band off, but that's okay as well. We're just going to work around that barrel band for now. We can get a good look at how crude the machining is on the barrel. For this late war example, a mid-war or early war Arisaka, most of the barrel will be like this. It'll be very flat and shiny. On late war examples, it's very common to see these rotary machining marks. It doesn't impede the function of the rifle at all, and that was one step they could cut out to make production of the rifles quicker and more smoothly overall. Now we're going to attempt to try to take off some of this white paint. I don't know what chemical would be the best at removing that, so we're going to experiment with a couple of things. First, I figured we would go straight to some carb and choke cleaner. Sometimes this will take off paint, sometimes it will not. It all depends on what kind of paint it is. I moved the stock parts out of the way because I certainly don't want to get any of this carb cleaner on the wood, but we'll just blast a little bit of this and then give it a good scrub and see if it loosens any of that up. And then it appears like it might be having an effect. I'm sure denatured alcohol would probably do a good job. I do not have any of that though. Paint thinner probably work 100%. Any kind of paint stripper would probably work very well. All of those though are things that I don't really have on hand at the moment, so I'm just trying to make do with what I do have. Check that out. It is taking it off. You can see the white residue mixed in with a little bit of rusty residue on my towel here. Before I commit to using straight carb cleaner though, I did want to try a little bit of Hoppy's number 9. It is after all a solvent, and even though it is bore solvent, it might be able to dissolve this paint. So I'll apply some of that with a toothbrush. That appears to be working very well, quite a bit better than the carb cleaner. For one, it's more liquidy, and so it sort of stays in place and does its dissolving job a little better. You can see how milky the drippings are because they're picking up all that white residue. I could get super abrasive with this and use some steel wool or maybe a more aggressive brush than a toothbrush, but I don't want to damage anything. So we're just taking it all nice and easy. Oh yeah, that is most certainly working. I think this is going to require a good deal of scrubbing to get it all removed, but it does appear that Hoppy's number 9 is taking off that paint. This paint wasn't necessarily causing an issue. It wouldn't impede the function of the rifle at all. It's under the handguard, so you can't even see it. I wanted to know what was under it though, just in case there was severe pitting under that paint and was trying to cover something up, and that's why I decided to take it off. Otherwise, if I thought that it was completely clean underneath, I probably would have just left that paint as is because it wasn't hurting anything. Now that I've got it down this far, I can tell that there is no visible pitting under that paint, so that's a good thing. The barrel's nice and solid. Come to think of it, acetone would probably do a very good job of taking this paint off as well, but unfortunately I used the last bit of acetone I had on my last project and I haven't restocked yet. I could continue with this forever and it would most certainly take all of that paint off, but I've seen as much as I need to see. I know that there is no serious pitting under that paint at this point, and that's really what I wanted to know go. So for now, I'm going to leave that as is. I can always come back later and finish it on off with a more powerful and efficient solvent. This magazine spring that I received from Gun Parts Corp is covered in sticky cosmoline. My cloth here is basically covered in hot piece number 9. And that dissolves cosmoline no problem. So I'm going to give this a good wiping down, paying close attention to the crevices, because that's where the cosmoline likes to build up at. Look at that. It's like nasty earwax gunk, but it has protected this spring for all these years, and that's a good thing. And now that is sufficiently clean for my liking. Give a little wipe down on all of our screws, since we have everything taken apart. The barrel action of this rifle looks to be in pretty good condition. I wouldn't have been surprised if there would have been some rust under the wood line, but it looks pretty clean as far as I can tell. Let's get our magazine and follower back together. This magazine spring has 2 sides, a wide side and a more narrow tapered side. The more narrow side goes underneath the follower. There's what is essentially a folded clip in the follower that the magazine spring slides under. This little ridge in the back allows it to pop into place, and it fits in very securely. To get that into the rifle, we will lower our magazine floor plate, and there is another little raised up clip on this and a little ridge in the back. The front part of the spring slides under said clip, and the rear part is held in place by that tab. And that is a newly installed floor plate and spring. It is obscene how much money these cost. It is such a simple part to go on the rifle, and you were very easily looking at 50 bucks with just those 2 parts put together right there. If you have an Arisaka rifle without this metal magazine box, your follower will tilt side to side from the gap left with the absence of that box and can cause some jams. So if you're having jamming or feeding issues with your Arisaka, take it down and make sure you have one of those metal magazine boxes installed. I have run across rifles missing those in the past. Let's start getting things back together. We'll reinstall our wooden bottom fore-end first. Put it under that barrel band first, and then it very simply just slides into the recess, cut into the nose cap. The barreled action fits right back down into the stock, the same way it was taken out. Our magazine and trigger assembly fits right back in, and we replace our 3 action screws. In the Arisaka, it's shortest screw, medium length screw, and longest screw. Tighten those down, and we'll fit our follower and magazine spring back down to the magazine box, clip everything in. So you can see what I was talking about earlier. This floor plate has been modified to where the bolt can close on an empty mag. On a standard Arisaka, this end down here that's very visibly been ground off would be poking up and prevent the bolt from closing. But since this one has been ground off, the bolt closes. No big deal in my opinion. Let's give it a little loading test to make sure that the follower actually feeds. I have a few cartridges here of 7.7 Japanese, packed by Precision Cartridge Incorporated, using PPU brass. So the follower does hold 1 round, 2, and 3. All that seems to be fine. This magazine does hold 5 rounds, but we're only going to test it with 3 here. And we'll close our bolt on that round. That did shut as it should, but it did not extract the cartridge as it should. We might have an extractor issue going on. Let's try this second one. So that fed out of the magazine just fine. And if we pull the bolt back, even pulling back with authority, it is not extracting the cartridge. So I think we might still be missing a part or have a damaged part. We'll have to look at that here in just 1 second. We'll try this third one. Same thing. It feeds just fine, but no extraction. The plot thickens. I can't believe I didn't notice it sooner, but we are completely missing the extractor. On the Arisaka, the extractor is inside of the receiver. It's part of the bolt release mechanism, and it is completely missing, causing this bolt release to have absolutely no spring tension. Here is another Arisaka that does have the extractor included. You can see that metal blade here that is under spring tension. That is the extractor. So that is yet another piece that I'm going to have to source for this particular rifle before it is complete and whole. That's unfortunate, but we will continue progressing forward in this particular video. I think it's time to get this barrel band secured. So we will reinstall our short length handguard. These have a metal tab affixed to the wood that slides just under the edge of the rear sight there, securely locking it into place. We pull all that together and slide our barrel band over. Lastly, we simply insert our $20 screw and we'll just cinch that tight. That has our barrel band done. For our butt plate nail holes, I have devised a plan to tighten those up, and hopefully it will be successful, although admittedly, I have never done this before. I could very easily just epoxy that butt plate on, and it would fit very securely, but I wouldn't really be able to reverse it if I ever wanted to. So what I'm going to do is take a couple of these little matchsticks, snip off a little portion here, and the plan is to essentially use this tiny little piece of matchstick wood as a shim to fill up empty space in the nail hole. It shouldn't take very much. I have a very small piece of wood there, and I'm basically just going to insert that into our nail hole. And once we put the nail in there as well, everything should fit nice and tight. Now that our metal components have been boiling for quite a while, that rust should be converted to an inactive oxide, but first we must remove that loose orange oxide. For that, I have a little bit of de-oiled 4/0 steel wool. I previously soaked this in some acetone. That is why I no longer have any acetone on hand. We're basically just going to vigorously rub these metal components to get that orange oxide off the outside. The oxide on these nails is very persistent, so we might actually need to give these another boiling before we're ready to reinstall on the rifle. The rest of the components are cleaning up nicely though. You can tell very clearly on the swing swivel, the orange oxide that's on the edges here, and then the nice deep dark black of the part that I've already cleaned off. This is a little bit of a tedious task, but essentially I'll just go over every bit of the metal on this with the steel wool until I have all of that orange oxide removed. If you have a very persistent patch of rust, all you have to do is go back, boil it again, and card it again. You continue repeating the process until you get your desired look. Also, don't be afraid to very lightly use a copper or brass brush in the areas you have a hard time getting to with the steel wool, which can be a struggle sometimes. As long as you're not using too coarse of a brush, this will not damage the metal at all. After a second cycle of boiling and carding, we are nicely blackened on all of our parts. Take a look at how crudely made and rough these nails are. It's pretty amazing that they were putting something so crude into combat use, but I guess it got the job done. I will hit all of these metal components with a little bit of rim oil to protect them from future rust. I'm very curious to see if my matchstick spacers are going to work as I intended them to. So I'm basically going to start these nails by hand just to make sure they all line up into the hole that they should be going into. I didn't put a spacer in the top one, so that one just went straight in by hand. The other two are a good deal tighter though, so I will have to tap this middle one in. Shouldn't be too hard because I didn't put that much wood in the hole, just a little bit to tighten things up. And a couple taps on the lower one. Since this wasn't a permanent solution, I can always go back and add more wood to those holes if I'd like to. But for now, that is pretty securely in place, and it is completely reversible. I didn't use any epoxy or glue, so nothing's permanent, just the way I wanted it to be. One last part to install, and that is our single screw swivel here. Early Arisaka rear butt swivels have 2 screw holes. They later switched to this single screw hole to save on materials. And if you get into the very late war examples, some rifles just have a simple hole all the way through the stock that you were supposed to feed your sling through. This is a very tight fit, so I'm going to tap it in with my rubber mallet here. Finally replace our screw. And that's screwed in nice and secure. I think that about does it for today's repairs. That was some very good progress that I made on this rifle. It is unfortunate that I failed to realize that it was missing the extractor as well, because now I have to find that part. So if you have any leads on a Type 99 extractor, shoot them my way. A last-ditch Arisaka is something that I've always wanted in my firearms collection. It's a very unique piece of World War II history, and it really shows how desperate Japan was getting at the end of the war as far as resources go. Even though these rifles are crude and use the minimum amount of materials, they are still super solid rifles and really good shooters for the most part. Hopefully I'll get that extractor in and we'll get this rifle out to the range before long to finally send some lead. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I truly appreciate it. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up. That really helps the channel out with the algorithm. And gun channels, of course, need all the help they can get on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch all of my future videos on Arisakas and other cool military surplus firearms. Let me know what you thought about the video down in the comments, and what are your experiences with Arisakas, especially late war, last ditch examples like this one. I will catch you guys in the next video. See you then. Peace.